In this video lecture, we're going to talk about card sorting. What is card sorting? It's a method for discovering categories in qualitative data. Generally speaking, the way it works is this. Data points go on cards, participants sort the cards, and then researchers examine the piles that the participants have created. There are some wrinkles on it, and we're going to talk about how the details work. Point is, it's really pretty easy, and it's also a lot of fun. There are 4 varieties of card sorting we're going to talk about. There's an open sort, a closed sort, a queue sort, and an inverse or reverse sort. The open sort, the participants take cards, they put them into piles, and then they put labels on those piles. A closed sort, you're going to give the users some predefined headings and say, please put the cards into piles under these headings. A queue sort, the participants will take the cards and put them in some sort of order, first to last, worst to best, best to worst, whatever it may be, in some sort of sequence. Then an inverse or reverse sort, the participants are looking for a particular card or set of cards that have something in common in the deck of cards you've given them. We're going to use a standard deck of playing cards as an example for the card sorting. Normally, we would give the participants these cards, and when I say these cards, they were often cards with words on them or pictures on them, whatever it is, not actual playing cards, but I'm using playing cards here as an example because it's easy to understand. So, let's go through some examples of card sorting. We'll start with an open sort. You're going to tell your participants, group these poker cards into categories that make sense to you. Once you've done that, label the categories. Then you give them this deck of cards. Again, it's all randomized, but it's in order here just because it's easier for us to see as an example how it works. So in open sort, the users can say, okay, well, I see aces, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, jacks, queens, and kings. Then you'd put a label on each of them. Now, I'm actually not going to put a label just because it's a whole lot of labels, but you get the idea. We could also do an open sort, something like this. We've got all the diamonds, all the hearts, all the spades, all the clubs. That works as well. And again, I should label these, but we're going to pretend that I did and move on from there. What if we do something like this? The participants say, okay, well, all of these are in a pile and all of these are in a pile. We've got splotches and we've got people. Is that valid? Of course it is. Anything that they do, anything your users do, whatever piles they create, are correct because they're making sense to them. Then we could also do something like this. Well, we've got all of these here. What are these? What do they have in common? Oh, they're cards. They have 3 letters in their names. ACE or ONE, either way. TWO, SIX, TEN. Then we've got, cards with 4 letters. FOUR, FIVE, NINE, JACK, and so on. So you get the idea. They can group the letters or the cards into whatever piles it is that they make sense to them, and then they just give them the label that makes sense to them. As an example of a closed sort, we'd tell our users, you've been provided with category names. Group the poker cards into these categories. So, perhaps we'll give them the categories of even numbers, odd numbers, and face cards. Here are all the even numbers, here are all the odd numbers, and here are all the face cards. They put them in these piles. There we go. That's a closed sort. We could also do something like this. Now we're going to use the lyrics from Steely Dan's song, Do It Again. Now you swear and kick and beg us that you're not a gambling man. Then you find you're back in Vegas with a handle in your hand. Your black cards can make you money, so you hide them when you're able. In the land of milk and honey, you must put them on the table. So, cards that you should hide, and other cards. Cards that you should hide are these ones. All the other cards are these. See how a closed sort is? You give them some sort of rule and have them follow that rule. A queue sort, remember, we're going to have them organize the cards in some sort of sequence. So for example, we give them this deck of cards and say, order these poker cards by their face values. Okay, they go through and they line them up. Here's a pile of 2s, here's a pile of 3s, here's a pile of 4s. It doesn't actually matter what order these suits would appear in. Now, these are all just in the same order because, well, it's where I got the pictures. But imagine, maybe it's you've got, instead of hearts on the first each time, you've got a hearts, then a spades, then a diamonds, then a diamonds, then a clubs, whatever it may be. Point is, 2, 3, pile of 2s, piles of 3s, piles of 4s, etc. Another example of a Q sort, let's say order these bridge cards by their suit values. Notice we are going bridge cards this time, not poker. All right, so how are we going to do this? Well, I'm going to give them those cards, and then I'd say, all right, users, they say spades are top, followed by hearts, followed by diamonds, followed by clubs. That's the sequence for of suits for a bridge. Now, please again notice these cards should not necessarily be in numerical order. You're going to have just a pile, a random pile of all the spades, and then a random pile of all the hearts, then a random pile of all the diamonds, a random pile of all the clubs. But again, I couldn't find images of cards that were just in random order, and I don't feel like manipulating 52 separate images. So you'll just have to deal with this and understand that, imagine each of those rows is jumbled. Another example of sort is the inverse or reverse sort. In this time, we're going to ask the users to find all the cards that contain pictures of weapons. Well, here's one. We got an axe, he's got a sword, he's got an axe, he's got a sword, and he's got a sword. Look at that. So we've gone through, had the users identify and pull out and make a pile of all the cards that have this particular thing in common. So that's the theory of how this works. Let's actually get practical and talk about rules for doing a card sort. So here are some rules for how to run a card sorting session. First thing you do, you make a test plan. You're going to do things that you'll do for most studies. For example, selecting participants, developing a script, scheduling the session, focusing on what data am I going to collect, choosing the appropriate analysis procedures once you do collect that data. What are you going to do with it, etc. Point is, you're going to treat this like any other testing session and have this test plan all formulated before you actually start. You're then going to prep the content cards. When you prep the content cards, there's a trick to it. You have to make sure that there's the same level of granularity. In other words, every item is going to be equal in terms of category. Here's an example to help you understand exactly what we're talking about. So we've got Ford, BMW, Cadillac, Lexus, Honda, Ram, Kia, Corvette, Chevrolet, Honda, Genesis. Wait a minute, one of these things doesn't belong. Corvette doesn't belong. Why? It's because Corvette is a model of car. It's not a brand of car. All the others are brands, but Corvette is a particular model. So in other words, when you're starting to create lists of cards, the contents for cards, you've got to make sure that they're all the same sort of thing and that one is not on a higher level that would hold things that are below it, or it would not be part of a list of something that you are of another card. For example, Corvette would be a part of Chevrolet card. Then you're going to number or code the cards for post-test analysis. Now, you don't always have to do this. Sometimes it would be very, very useful. For example, if you're working with colors. Well, how do you categorize colors? You can use CMYK values, you can use RGB values. That sort of information would be really, really valuable. But if people are just looking at the colors themselves and sorting them out, then that would they don't need to know those values, but you need to know them for afterward. So numbering or coding can be very useful, but it's not always necessary. You're then going to brief the participants once they've arrived. You want to explain the procedure and answer any questions they have, but make sure you don't affect their responses. So if they ask, what are we doing? Just tell them, we're doing a card sorting session. We're going to ask you to organize these things. Be general. Don't exactly tell them what to do. Stick to the script. You're going to then shuffle the cards. Very important. You got to make sure that the cards are randomly organized. and have them start sorting. Get to it. Once they do, they're going to be sorting away. You can ask questions and provide encouragement, but don't butt in. Only insert yourself if it's needed. If they're slowing down, if they're looking puzzled, you can ask them questions also like, how would you describe the cards in this pile? Remember the idea? You want to avoid the dreaded why, because they're going to make up reasons. This should be very user-guided. You're letting them do whatever it is that they feel like doing as long as they follow the rule that you've given them. Once they're done, record the results that you've got. For card sorting, taking a picture is an excellent choice, and then you analyze the results. So let's review what we've talked about today. We've talked about what card sorting is and does. We've talked about the 4 different types of card sorting, and we've also talked about how to run a card sorting session. That's the end of this video lecture.